So once again, here in this garden with lots of shade, we're able to gather. So the incomparable master, Godin Trisur Rinpoche, who, while he was the throne holder of the Gelug tradition, he really worked hard. And also when he was the abbot of Sanstanling Monastery, as well as the Gyume Tantric College, he really worked hard to improve the education of the monastics there. So thanks to his hard work that we have been able to gather once again here in this place, Samstanling Monastery. So I'd like to thank everyone involved in preparing this gathering.
Then come Galdan Tipa Juxana, the Nanazina, then Daspum Losaling composer de Juxana, the Nanazina reduced Made, then a composer de Juxana, then a Charles Ma, Gangshan, Matakoza, then also Rahal, then a Tewiket and Matakon and also, then a Galdan Tirimboche, then a Diling Eka, then the Tizucho, the no, then a Comet, then a Molkanazina, Skundunika, then a Sergic Peps Day. Pepshala tene kong tukje chejera tene nanzin la kondang deliot kane tene mimang sangmalang tene kunduni tashi de lek somazad.
Kaya. Kanya eri. Teri dangin tadri da. Ngala shiwini wustong mro.
First one recites the Heart Sutra.
Oh. Two churches. Gate. Some was the two churches.
So the Heart Sutra, Heart of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutra, thus have I heard once. The Blessed One was staying at Rajgriha at Vulture Peak, along with a great community of monks and a great community of bodhisattvas. And at that time, the Blessed One entered the meditative absorption on the varieties of phenomena called the appearance of the profound. At that time as well, the noble Avalokiteshvara and the Bodhisattva, the great being, clearly beheld the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom itself, and saw that even the five aggregates are empty of inherent existence. Thereupon, through the Buddha's inspiration, the Venerable Shariputra spoke to the noble Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being, and said, "How should any noble son or noble daughter who wishes to engage in the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom train?" When this had been said, the holy Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being, spoke to the Venerable Sharadodiputra and said, "Shariputra, any noble son or noble daughter who wishes to engage in the practice of the profound perfection of wisdom should clearly see this way. They should see perfectly that even the five aggregates are empty of inherent existence. Form is emptiness, emptiness is form. Emptiness is not other than form, and form too is not other than emptiness. Likewise, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness are empty. Therefore, Shariputra, all phenomena are emptiness. They are without defining characteristics. They are not born, they do not cease, they are not defiled, they are not undefiled, they are not deficient, and they are not complete. Therefore, Shariputra, in emptiness, there is no form, no feeling, no perceptions, no form, mental formations, and no consciousness. There is no eye, no ear, no nose, no tongue, no body, no mind. There is no form, no sound, no smell, no taste, no texture, and no mental object. There is no eye element, and so on up to no mind element, including up to no mental consciousness element. There is no ignorance, no extinction of ignorance, no aging and death and extinction of aging and death, and likewise there is no suffering, no origination, cessation, and path. There is no wisdom, no attainment, and even no non-attainment. Therefore, Shariputra, since bodhisattvas have no attainment, they rely on this perfection of wisdom and abide in it, having no obscuration in their mind. They have no fear, and by going utterly beyond error, they will reach the end of nirvana. All the Buddhas too, who abide in the three times, attained the full awakening of unexcelled perfect enlightenment by relying on this profound perfection of wisdom. Therefore, one should know that the mantra of the perfection of wisdom, the mantra of great knowledge, the unexcelled mantra, the mantra equal to the unequaled, the mantra that quells all suffering is true because it is not deceptive. The mantra of the perfection of wisdom is declared. The Bodhisattva's great being should train the perfection of wisdom in this way. Thereupon the Blessed One arose from that meditative absorption and commended the holy Avalokiteshvara, the Bodhisattva, the great being, saying, "This is excellent, 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 O noble child. It is just so. It should be just so. One must practice the profound perfection of wisdom just as you have revealed, and then even the Tathagatas will rejoice." This is a one verse praise to the mother of all the Buddhas, the perfection of wisdom. So what we just recited, the Heart Sutra, is also called the perfection of wisdom in 25 verses. So the main teaching of the Buddha is the teaching on the perfection of wisdom. And in order to explicate this, there is Abhisamaya Alamkara written by Maitreya, which explains the implicit content of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. So the verse of salutation from Abhisamaya Alamkara was recited, and next we are going to recite the verses of salutation from Mula Madhyamaka Karika. And Mula Madhyamaka Karika by Nagarjuna is the text which explains the explicit content of the Perfection of Wisdom Sutras. So many of you may have come to the last teachings in the Diskit Monastery and then the public teaching in the other place. So during for the last 3,000 years or so, there had been many non-Buddhist teachers, founding teachers of various schools. And then in the Arab region, the Middle East, Jesus Christ also appeared and Muhammad also appeared. And so we have many different religious traditions that appeared in the world. His Holiness is showing the bread that was offered to him and asking if everybody has also the bread. So that was the blessing for the tea and bread. So in this world, when human beings faced with problems and challenges and found that they cannot do anything on their own to face these challenges, and then therefore the religious traditions evolved. So because things were beyond their control, like the sufferings of birth, aging, sickness, and death, and therefore they sought something, some higher power in which they can put their hope. So even today in this world, there are people who worship the sun, fire, which started with the primitive human beings. And therefore, because of not being able to do anything when they're faced with problems, they prayed to, they worship fire and then also the sun and the moon. And slowly people started using the term, saying that there is something called God, and said that if you put faith, keep your faith in God, our problems would be solved. And so religious traditions appeared. So when it comes to philosophical explanation of the religious traditions, perhaps it started in India, this kind of tradition with the Sankhya school of philosophy, which asserts 25 objects of knowledge, and they say that things emerged or were created by something called primal factor. And so and then this school says that when we are ignorant about the nature of this primal factor, the chief primal factor, then we have suffering. Whereas once you understand that the diverse things in the world are just the manifestations of this primal factor, and then eventually you reach moksha. And then later on in India, the Jain tradition came, and Jainism does not believe in a creator God. And also the Sankhya school of philosophy, one part of it did not believe in a creator God. And then about 2,600 years ago, the Shakyamuni Buddha appeared in this world, and he went through the practices of cultivating concentration that were prevalent in India in his time. And he found out that all the problems that we face cannot be solved as long as we hold on to this idea of an independent self, or Atman, a soul theory. And it may also have to do with his own, the imprints that he had in his mind from the past, having cultivated wisdom, realizing selflessness, that he sought the path to end suffering. And then he became enlightened, and then gave the teachings that are comprised in the Pali canons, canonical literature, and then there is the Sanskrit tradition. And within the Sanskrit tradition, there are the teachings which are basic, common to the Pali tradition, as well as the perfection of wisdom teachings, as well as the four sets of the tantric teachings. And then, with regard to the perfection of wisdom teachings, the Buddha Maitreya became one of the chief commentators to the perfection of wisdom teachings regarding the implicit content of these sutras. And then before him, the Master Nagarjuna commented on the explicit content of emptiness of the perfection of wisdom teachings. And so these texts and other texts by Indian masters are the exegetical treatises that we can even study today to understand the content of the perfection of wisdom teachings.
Tene igun selchas potene janma jiga yot kya zarte janma jiga rewa cholkane tes nastang bojong kya sonara tena nangin la tene gyarena te sosi tene choluk mangpodang philoga tene christian dang lo stong yezo chirngan la christian dang testing na tene islam zerkan te zoga jong kya sonara testing nas kondone te songa ta la tene 이 지게나가 결대나 로송 투명한라 daksinga Sankhya zerkan yana Trangchan bazerkan tene samsul bujung kya songarahal tene tewani kertena tene I yuldang tene seme namjak shada dan nyampo shesha nishur sange tene namjak chiksat kya so tene tene shchi so zerkan bi tene I piloge sachu me lung rirawa khankimso te sangma shchi so e tulte tene dakshiri kiskis bu zerkan bo teola tulte nang tene izoga koro dongal nyongkane snastang soksik tene Sankhya zerkan be shade kya so testing na jen zerkan tene azuko jong kya so arahal tene jen zerkan ston babo jung te tene teyang dongal selcha tang dewa dupcha je tabde stan kya inang jikten che papo kelena met kya so tena nang jen la Sankhya zerkan biang isama shchi so tene stente ons kan jigmene tene jikten che papo yot kan espera kelena met kya so ara tena nang jen la izugang nastang yot kya so ara tene ngata dongal selcha se pia me tot pijaste tene ngata trangmo selcha tang tene ngata mundige jiksenang nyampo nyeme odi jate tevis kapkan soksi chote tene me skap chocha tang nima skap chocha se tesuk na tang jong kya so ara ha ta testing na tene sangye chomdandas tene lo nistom tugya jerman la tene kong jikta la pepcha so tene kong pepse tuspola tene jagarina tes na stambo tarte yot kap tene gom kapcha to tingi zin kapcha so dak kelencha so tezuges na tanjena sangye skyoda zate tene sanges konang skochang hanna gunina tene pachakma tupo yotkan bishaste tesami tene dungal bo sel tuba minu sang tugla gongste tene dak me peltawa bo stana zakya somara hal tene dak me peltawa state tene korlo sumzo tezuk tene kanjur sherchini dozuk tezuk song kyawas tebe keltena tene sangye chomdanda te dak me pawa tene goma zate tene ngata thonmo tangchula tene dorje tanla tene sangyas kandang te esting na choskos koraza testing na yang la das kan tene sultan chaso te sangma keltana sting na kadu zate tene kadu zat kan bo dasa pali na tene te wo yote no soara tene tekchen nang jin chona dase tena sherchen dogun te wo so te wo dasa ngata skadina tene kanjur puti kya tezuk ngata na yote no so tene te gonspa delcha se pia tene dasi jamcho denga tang tene papa thongme de tene sa denga tang dom namni zerkan so tezuk zate tene 제가 됐어. 또 상황라 발군 박발 흔들을 때네 실전에 도이 모스탄에 돈보 때네 송화자대 다시 리속적 교속 막고 송화자자서 대고 상만 결단은 나타난 스카디나가 때네 간줄 tang stanjur te kanjure gongpa delkane tene stanjur tene ngata mangpayo tene also tebo kheltana ngata lojushi sulla menba tasangata na tene lobjung chugi yotkan dasana ngata thonggi yotkan tene ngata lobjung chuen yotkan nasang jiga tene yote no so
뭐야 나라다 지금 거봐 하가 망찰이야 근주된 주신 쇼도아.
So in most of our temples and monasteries, we have the Kanjur, the translations of the words of the Buddha, and the Tenjur texts, the exegetical treatises. So the exegetical treatises written by Indian masters are the ones that the great Indian scholars wrote after analyzing the teaching of the Buddha well. And then in the 7th century, the Tibetan emperor Tsongkhapa took interest in the teaching of the Buddha. And then later, during the time of the three personalities, the great abbot Chandarakshita and Master Padmasambhava and the sponsor or benefactor, the Tibetan emperor Chisung Detsen, through their kindness, Buddhism spread more widely on the Tibetan soil, and it spread the length and breadth of Tibet. And since then, there are now a few, like 20,000 or so, commentaries written by Tibetan masters. Many of them just handwritten, and most of them printed. So serving and making contribution to the teaching of the Buddha through by writing these commentaries by Tibetan masters. I mean, we have not failed to do that, commenting on the 300 volumes of the Kanjur and Tenjur, over 300 volumes. To speak from philosophical point of view, there are 4 philosophical schools within Buddhism, and then each of them also has subdivisions, sub-schools, and the texts belonging to these schools of philosophy are also translated into Tibetan. So the study of these philosophical traditions, philosophical schools, and their assertions and views and so forth are extant in the Tibetan language, written in the Tibetan literature. And so the entire teaching of the Buddha, it seems, when you give thought to this, it seems that with this tradition that we have in the Tibetan seems to be the most profound and most extensive tradition.
Tasting na tene porla yatadon pena choja shongsan gampe tuzla tene choja kampo tuksam jezuk corte porla sangezistan babo tene goma lepka gozuk so These things na gyatrak gyatpe na tene kanchen buddhe sato laman panma jungna tenyes kala chinda ho chuja trishong desane zate tene ketena nangpe stanba botene ma gyachen begona tarkya songra. These things na po de khaspa guni takse kanju dang stanju delpa sok zate tene ma lama guni ngami lama guni tene mana mangpo dia zate yot kya so kachik parla kyapte mepe to ti mangpo jik yotik du song ra to la sambata na nyampo sangestan be pia tene po de khaspa guni ma japtok chen mo jik juste no tena nangjin la po de na tarkane sange stamba bola kertena sanda ma chachang yongzok sik Pena tekpa chechung shnakang chaspa teyo teno so. Tena nangjin la druptar mawa ji tene chasang yu teno. Druptar mawa korang nangku tene yang nangku ina tene chung tene yang la so yot kyap. Teo chasang jik porla ma gyala yu teno so. Teo tuksam sala nang nyampo sangye sistan ba izuk trapo gyaspa chasang kan izuk zamu yot kan bo kertena jiktene na tene porla tene tebo yote no so.
So this complete teaching of the Buddha that exists existed in Tibet spread further to the north of Tibet in the Mongolian region. So today, Mongolia is divided into the inner, outer, and then there are some republics within the Russian Federation, Buryat, Tuva, and Kalmykia, three republics in the Russian Federation. And then in the Himalayan regions, this tradition of Tibetan Buddhism spread. Today we are in the 21st century. So even now, thanks to the great works of Master Chandrakshita, mainly, and then the Tibetan masters of the past, that we have been able to, for over 1,000 years, we have preserved this tradition, and this tradition is very relevant in today's world. I'm an old person. I've met with many different people from different fields, different backgrounds, many scholars. And having met with these people and having discussed and then seen the world for these many number of years, what I find is that the disturbance in people's mind, there is so much disturbance in mind that people have mental problems, and these problems have not come from outside, but because of these negative emotions such as arrogance, pride, anger, competitive sense of competition, and so forth. So we need to know what are the shortcomings of these negative emotions, for example, anger. And the opposite of it is love. And you also should see the advantage of cultivating love, and then apply put your effort in cultivating effort to combat anger. And therefore, we need to know the system of emotions, system of mind well. So when you understand, in order to do that, when we understand the emotion, the system of emotion as a whole, we have a very broad way of looking at the mind. And as opposed to which, when you have anger, it's actually a very narrow minded. And therefore, you try to hold on to some kind of an independent target. And whereas when you think closely, you'll see that even the anger that you have, arises because of many different factors and not just one cause. And therefore, it's important for us to be realistic, to understand reality well. So from the scientific point of view, it's important to understand the quantum physics and the view of the quantum physicists. And so, although the scientists do not use the term interdependent or dependent origination as such, but some scientists say that this is something that they can actually think about. So even today in this 21st century, all these problems that we face, in order to solve the problems, you don't need to become religious people as such, nor follow particularly Buddhism. But the study of psychology and study of mind and emotions, and also logic and epistemology that are taught and that we find in Buddhist literature can be used to deal with our emotions. When in terms of logic, we talk about such and such things arising from such and such causes and conditions, and because of this, that happens, and so forth. And therefore, the writings of the Nalanda masters on psychology and logic and epistemology, I find them to be really relevant in today's world. So this, the teaching of the Buddha, which existed for the last nearly 2,600 years, is something relevant today and also beneficial in today's world. And so for us, as Buddhists, of course, we are doing this kind of teaching. These are our own religion. So we should, while we follow this tradition, we should not think that this is like our custom that we are following and be complacent about it. But you need to, through study, we will be able to see that the teaching that we have, this teaching of the Buddha that we have, is something relevant and beneficial in today's world.
Tena chisok tang nangsok zerte tezo gyo chaosa. Teo masa dang dini ayukane tuba zerkan dang, kalmuk zerkan dang, buriyat zerkan, tevi na tene tan nga tang porla tarkane nangpe chospo tene ma shante tarkya songara hal. Tene skundun te isting na tevo songara tene skundun tena daksa gunglo tene gechu kyangila pepte nos. Tene skundun kertena jikteni tene yurtu mangpang skot khasba mangpang mana mangpo tu songara hal. Izu chote tuksam sala nang nyampo jiktenes nastang bala tuksam jik sala nang nyampo nyokcha mangpo yotkan jik zingtuk mangpo yotkan tezuk jik nastang jik zik tu so. Tela tuksam sal te kera nang nyampo te nyokcha te midik patsang ma yong sabu kerte nang tene sema tukte te no songara hal. Tene ngata I sembo madul kan bichaste tene I philo tene nyokta sama yongste no so ta I sem madul janana nya potene skundune tevo swara tene ngata semena khongto zer kanso dansem zer kanso tene kertena chadok zer kanso tezuk tene na semena mangpo jigyote jaste tebichate tene mi samena to so yotkan bichaste jiktene na I nyokta sama langte no so ti nyokta sama pilok na chos tangkan jik meno nangku ki sem madul kan bijate yongkan jike no so ta daksinga tang seme nangku ayot kan kongto zerkan dansem zerkan te ula ketena tena tang mithun kan jike tena ngata samlo chik tena tango shet kya so tena ketena kongto shante yonga sok te uchona yetene chamba gomcha sok te zuwi snastang de gomte tebo tene dulgo shet kya so ara tene kongto zerkan 또 상매상 투쇼 인격 लेकिन kirtana ko kirtana ton tak chung jingmana ko jagabo kirtana kongte jagabo kirtana chung jingmene metkak songara hal spera chung ji tebi pia sembo kirtana ngata ma gyacheno sem yangpo ji gose kyak songara hal tebi sna tangmena kirtana tena ngata sambatang sulena yura kyongte sherab zarkano te won pelchokte tezukna tangji drup go shayet kya sa tebi pia tene tengun metkan jocha se pia tene daksanga ta por la tar te yot kane tene nang pe chos pe tena kertenang tene semkam rikpa kab kertenang psychology tene chigan ja so ra tes nastang bo gyala ji ha kona tene kertenang daksanga ta yot kane semenang ko yot kane semena lang sen to kane te yokta sama jicha la thap mang ko tenana bengte yo cha so tena nang jin la tene daksanga ta te semnang del kane yokta gon tene selcha se pia quantum physics zerkane samlogonang tegunang ma pantrante tokse kya so hal tena solang ata ina koni te six ota kola met kya so science ba inang standard zerkan bo stanchi ibo yona ibo yongo so ibo chana ibo charuk zerkane te sna sulbo ketena taksinga ta por la tarte yotkan nalande kaspe songyun la yotkane tene standard le tontak po tebo hago cha sepia samarik pa yani logic etang teun kertana makak changjur te kyaasa tebi thokna tenenga ta standard na stangbo tola lobjong chona standard na stangbo gyala chote hago cha teno so ton tapos kondone tebo somara la tene darsi por la tarte yotkane nalande chujgut po kertena tasa gyatak nishur saksik pe jurte teno gyatak nishur saksik pe na yotkane megundang tenenga ta samtuldang drill yotkanje tene tantan jurte teno tebi tene kertena tene pan thokse tene sangyasi songcha pandika songcha ta los tongta kachi irkan la songcha por la tarka tebo dangri to solang tene pan thokse chi drill yotkane tene snastangje chakte yoteno so
oh yeah and the
So for the past 5 years, we have the Tibetans have lived as refugees or lived in exile. In the beginning, we were not so aware of this, but gradually, living in exile, in 1959, we became exiles and came to India. And the Namgyal Monastery and other monasteries like Gyume and Gyudu Tantric colleges, which were mostly engaged in tantric rituals, and which didn't have any study of philosophy, and I urged them to include the study of philosophy in their curriculum, and therefore the Namgyal Monastery started studying philosophy, studying texts like the systems of philosophical traditions and so forth, and also the Gyutu and Gyume Tantric colleges. Since I urged that it's important for them to do this kind of study of philosophy, and similarly, there was no tradition of the Tibetan nuns doing philosophical study in their institutions. It may have existed a long time in the past, a long time ago, but in the last many centuries, we didn't have that, and therefore I urged the nuns also to study philosophy, and therefore many of the nunneries and monasteries, which were traditionally ritual monasteries, took up the study of philosophy. And last year in December, we awarded we had the ceremony of awarding the Geshe Ma degrees, which is like the PhD degree for nuns, and having studied Buddhist philosophy for about 20 years. and therefore they deserved the Geshe degree, and so we gave the Geshe Ma degree to the nuns who have completed their study of philosophy. So I'm not being nice to you, but we have actually put into place the study of philosophy over many years. And Namgyal Monastery, His Holiness's private monastery, used to have the ritual dance. Perhaps it may have started since the 5th Dalai Lama's time. There are many ritual dances that the monks perform, and I didn't pay much attention to this because I found they not so necessary and to revive them as such. But I found it more important for the monks to understand the teaching of the Buddha well. And so after coming into exile, I took special interest in making people aware of the teaching, the study of the teaching, and I even actually reduced the performance of rituals in my own monastery. So you should also check whether what I have urged these monasteries to take up the study of philosophy has any benefit and purpose and reason or not. So if you see the importance of study and those nunneries and monasteries where you don't have yet the study of philosophy, and you should take up the study if you find it to be relevant and it's worth to take up the study of philosophy, and instead of just getting lost in the rituals. You should take them up. Take up the study of philosophy in your monasteries and nunneries.
Tasting na trukchu chilong chistong gobja trukchu tezam sig na phala tene skundong tuk sig tuk sam khor song ra hal perna namjal trachang zerkan bo skundong khongna ichigan jale trachang bo enkya tena masnan na tene sanyi di tene special tacha ti sholbo met kya so tenda sola jut stot zerkan jut mat zerkan tene gonpa yakya tena traba gonla skerim pa zerkan ne tene sanyi di jum ta met kya so tene skunduni tene teguni na tene sanyi di jung tachas tene boskul zaten gozuk zatpin sora namjal tazana tene cham skapchas ma trapo mar demo yongchan sora tego gyang skuto skutang hape tuzna tuksus kanjin kya so ezur demo kya sora lekin skundun teo chang gospajik mazik smola hal tola tezamsik nastak mazat pin sora hal tena nangsin la tene chome gonpa ma pa chakla chome gonpa te gonpa gune na tene nganma in mar nganma jini jang jise mala hal tene sting na tene te gune na tene sangi dang tacha se sholbo menu tene sangi tacha se sholbo sukspin songra hal tene chome gonpa na sangi tacha se sholbo sukste tene lo ishu sumju tene sangi taste tene geshes konang dande tene rabjong thonte tene nani skondone tene geshes ma zerte tene sunna mampo tene zoa geshes tene degree bo salazat pin sora hal sombasang skondone tezukshi tuksamjik salte lo tene jipchu ya sumchu jipchina tene tezam yargyachik tene ma trapojik yong tene sangi de jung tacha se sora hal tene ladak se gonpa mon la to so se tene ngata samlo tango sha no so ladak se tene chome gonpa na I gonpa gunena tene izuga choga chaglin chikyang tezuga tene tuksamrang mata tene jung tacha se tene tuksambo kurgo sha no tene skunduni kazukshi zate choga chaglin nyunga zatpen sora dak se Jundas ton mano te gunena choga tonja nangpo chaba tenyo kate I drubdans po zangpo jik tene Zatkani Dubras Kazuk Ton Kanbo, Skondoni Songa Zatkanbo, Kujan will learn the music so then Laras Pagunla, then the Kujan sang Sambaji dance day, then Otena, then so Sangin Stachasi, then a Jumbola, then a Kujana Nastak Salna, then a Gala no so.
Oh, yeah. That is the change.
So today's teaching there's this text written by the great master, manifestation of Manjushri, Tsongkhapa. So he has, his writings make up 18 volumes. The first volume is about life stories and so forth. And then there are other writings, smaller writings in the second volume. And then the third volume is the stages of the path of the Tantra. And if you actually look at his writings closely, then his wisdom on the sutra and the general teaching and the tantric esoteric teachings are marvelous. You'll actually see this if you read his writings. And he has written The Ocean of Reasoning, which is a commentary to the fundamental wisdom verses of the Middle Way by Nagarjuna. And then he also wrote the commentary on Madhyamaka Avatara, engaging or entering into the middle way, written by Chandrakirti, and his commentary is Elucidation of the Thought. And then also he wrote the extensive commentary on the Abhisamaya Alankara, which is the ornament for clear realization. So if you could study his writings on the middle way philosophy, the Madhyamaka philosophy, reading the Ocean of Reasoning, and then also reading it together with the other the Indian treatises on or explanations of the Madhyamaka Karika, you'll find how profound he has profoundly he has written. And so he read all the Indian commentaries on the Madhyamaka Karika and then wrote this text, The Ocean of Reasoning. And in other commentaries also, like the Garland of Rosary, which is the commentary on the ornament for clear realization, you'll find Tsongkhapa had read all the different Indian commentaries that were extant in Tibetan translation, and then wrote his commentary. So when he wrote this commentary on the Abhisamaya Alankara, he seems not to have not yet completed his analysis critical analysis into the middle way view of emptiness, because you'll see his later writings on the middle way philosophy of emptiness different from the writing on this earlier writing. So, for example, when he wrote The Ocean of Reasoning and the Elucidation of Thought, and also the treatise differentiating the provisional and definitive meanings of the sutra, you'll find him to have completed his analysis into the view of emptiness. And so the 5 texts that Tsongkhapa wrote on the middle way philosophy, the 3 that were mentioned, and also those of the insight section of the great treatise, or a great treatise on the stages of the path, and the middle or the intermediate stage of path. And so again, Gyobun Rinpoche and other scholars used to tell me that in order to really gain insight into the thinking of Tsongkhapa's understanding of emptiness, well, you should read these 5 treatises. So Tehor Kyurpan Rinpoche had once told me that when he was doing analysis into the middle way, the view of emptiness, which says that things do not have any inherent existence, but they are merely conceptually designated, he actually pondered on this and he found that, he actually came to think that, began to think that he thought that if that were true, then we could think about anything and anything could be true. But later on, he found that that was wrong, and so Rinpoche also said the same thing. And then, with regard to Tantra, there are the writings of the Master Tsongkhapa is really profound and excellent. And so Tsongkhapa was called, is known as the crowning jewel of the scholars of Tibet. And so this was written actually by the Rendawa. And so Rinpoche Tsongkhapa made a praise of his teacher, Rendawa Shunolotu, and praising him as the crowning jewel of, in that verse, there's this mention of being the crowning jewel of the scholars of the land of snow. And then Tsongkhapa, the Rendawa, his teacher, said, this praise, this prayer does not befit me, but it befits you. Therefore, he turned this around, the crowning jewel of Tibet, Rendawa, into Tsongkhapa. So you have many different commentaries by different scholars of Tibet on different Indian treatises. But if you read Tsongkhapa's writings, you'll really find him to have done great critical analysis into the writings of the Master Tsongkhapa, the Indian masters, and wrote his commentaries, his treatises. And regarding this particular text that we have chosen, for the teaching, Tsongkhapa was very interested in the middle way philosophy, or the view of emptiness. And at one point, he was able to have a vision of Master Manjushri, the wisdom Buddha, and his disciple Togden Jambe Yatso and Lama Umapa, his master, also had Manjushri, visions of Manjushri. And through Lama Umapa, Tsongkhapa was able to ask questions on the view of emptiness through Lama Umapa. So at that time, Rinpoche Tsongkhapa himself was not having any vision of Manjushri. So Jambe, the Manjushri told Tsongkhapa that the best teacher of who could explain to you the middle way of view of emptiness was the Rendawa, but he could not give you the decisive kind of explanation. Therefore, you need to read the Indian commentaries like Buddha Palita and the Prasanapada commentaries written by Buddha Palita and Chandra Kirti. And then in Gawadong, in his hermit, Master Tsongkhapa did a retreat, and then there he had the first vision of Manjushri sitting within a rainbow circle. And Manjushri gave him a very terse passage regarding the view of emptiness, and Tsongkhapa complained that he could not understand what Manjushri was actually trying to teach, and Manjushri told him that in order to get gain insight into this profound view of emptiness, you need to do practice whereby you purify negativities and also accumulate merit. And therefore, Tsongkhapa went into a retreat and then did all these practices of purification and accumulation of merit. And at one point in his retreat, he had the vision of this, the five masters of India, Madhyamaka, masters of Madhyamaka tradition of India. So as I age more and more, I tend to have more difficulty in remembering people's names. So Tsongkhapa's secret biography was written by Deshipalden, who was the founder of Drepung Monastery. And he mentions this vision of the five masters, like Master Nagarjuna, Aryadeva, his disciple, and then Buddha Palita. And some texts mention Bhaviveka, and then the other one is Chandra Kirti. And so in other words, there were in the vision the Master Nagarjuna and his disciples, like Buddha Palita, Aryadeva, Buddha Palita, Chandra Kirti, and also some say Bhaviveka. And so in this vision, amongst these five masters of India, Tsongkhapa in this vision saw Buddha Palita, who had a rather bluish or dark kind of complexion. And this person with dark complexion touched the text on his head. And then Tsongkhapa was said to have received a text of Buddha Palita on that day or something like that. And then he read that text, and when he came across the Buddha Palita text commenting on this verse, which says that if the aggregates were different from the self, then it would not have, if the self were different from the aggregates, it would not have the characteristics of the aggregates and so forth. And so Tsongkhapa, reading the commentary of Buddha Palita with regard to this verse, was said to have gained insight, penetrative insight into the view of emptiness. And therefore, because of this, it gave this inspiration to praise the Buddha for having taught the profound teaching of dependent origination. And that is the time when he wrote this text, which is called the in praise of dependent origination, teaching dependent origination. So when I was small, there was a master who was the throne holder, Ganden throne holder, Tashi Tongtun, from Drepung Losaling Monastery, and he was from the Minyak Kansen. So when he was there, I was able to actually memorize this text in one morning. And then I also asked the monks of Namgyal Monastery also to memorize this text. Although the text is short, it's quite comprehensive in terms of understanding emptiness, the view of emptiness. And it has also the blessing of Tsongkhapa himself, who worked very hard for many years and then gained insight into the view of emptiness. So I received the commentary or explanatory teaching on this text from Kinori Lama, Ginrin Tempa, and he may have received it from Causal Rinpoche. So because I have memorized this text early on, I recite it whenever I have time, and sometimes when I have difficulty sleeping, I recite this text. His Holiness is asking the Ladakhi interpreter to use your intelligence and critical acumen, and then translate an essence of what I have said.
Just for standard stot by in Songara Hall. Then is standard stot by Zatkanbo, then Gawa Tsongkhapa Chenbo, no Songara. Gawa Tsongkhapa Chenbe, then Sumbong Puti, then Jobjat Jason, then Goma Buketano Namtarin Jason, then Tena. Mangcha tene kertena yong del pan cha so nan do dang as tene eskondu ne te botang delte ibu so le tene chiga I jerim boche tene umes korla tene chaspe mana sal tonte skuchesh mala zatkan bola tene sawa sherabe delpa tene rikpe gya so dang tene kertena umajuk pe delpa tene gongpa rapsal tene lekshan yingpo tene lakdong chechung nisho teshnabo tene matrak poem kya songal tetana te gun sama zatsana tene gyar khaspa gune tene dopamindo amapo yotkan gun compare zate dura zate tene shchajib zate tantan jose mardemo jose 지가서 부탁 쳤바 탁 쳤바 직전에 송대였 겨서 된 디우스코론이 뭐제스고 놀라 때고 송하다라 송하라 할 때네 이
So Master Tsongkhapa writes, and towards the end of this text that His Holiness just recited, verse number 53, following such a teacher and having become a renunciate, having studied the conqueror's words not too poorly, this monk who strives in the yogic practices, such is the depth of his reverence to the great seer.
No sonte sonara sonara tenes konduri tebo sonara parchinis korla tene leksha setting buketena ma trapo yetena sonata demo jose kalteltana te yongo shaswe gyun chambos kondone tebo sonara gyagare tene nalante pandita tene ishur sakshi zatkane delpa dotang gyan jarkanda dotang gyan majarkane delpa gun tene yang izuga comparison zate tene setting na te zuga tene demo jose dia zate yotja sonara hal setting go
the digital transfer any
So it's said that Tsongkhapa wrote the commentary on Abhisamaya Alankara, which is called the Golden Rosary of Golden Rosary. It was written by Tsongkhapa when he was 25 or 26. And there was another master of the Sakya tradition of Tibetan Buddhism, the translator Dabash Rinchen was someone who actually was criticizing the Tsongkhapa in the beginning, but later when he saw this commentary, the Rosary of the Golden Rosary, he found Tsongkhapa to be a great scholar, and therefore he regretted his criticism of Tsongkhapa earlier on in his life. And therefore, when scholars actually meet with scholars and their writings, then they are able to actually see the quality, the profundity of their mind and so forth. And so Chera Rinchen regretted his criticism of Tsongkhapa and praised him to be a great scholar. So there's no use to try to praise one's lamas of one's own tradition, saying that this is a great scholar because of being a follower of the same tradition as me, like Gelugpa or Sakyapa and Nyingma or Kagyu. And so you need to actually read the writings of the different scholars from the different traditions and then compare and contrast them and have a definitive understanding of them so that you will be able to say make your praise or criticism and so forth. Otherwise, just saying I'm a follower of the Kagyuba or Sakya tradition or Nyingma or Gelug tradition, it's just a prejudice. And so that's not good. It's this kind of criticism without any knowledge comes because people are not studying. As I said in the other place yesterday, there are people who propitiate and worship this controversial spirit called Shugden, and who say that such a practitioner or worshipper of Shugden cannot keep even a text of the Nyingma tradition. And so, because if they did, then they would be harmed by Shugden. So these are really foolish thinking and doing. So Daksang Lotsawa, this great translator, Chera Rinchen, first made 18, actually came up with 18 different criticisms, pointing out the contradictions in Tsongkhapa's view and so forth. And then another master actually criticized this translator, Daksang Lotsawa, with 28 different contradictions in his own view. And so if we really read their writings and not be swayed by sectarianism, then it would be good to, we would be able to actually do critical analysis into their writings and give answers accordingly.
Leketana gakpa jaba zate gakpa dramindra chobjat thognatene criticize that chahal te was zate sting on the teneko lecture certain bodemo chote zixanang nyampo tenepat ha laste izuk dalpa kazu chaptano izuk tapodo tula gongste tene jerimbo chatene shaspa pulte tene izuwa chiga zuwa stotpa pulda zate tizukyo kya sonra te sokse chiga khaspa gone tene then transport transfer gona tene 6 day tene tezuwa inok mene tene chadang jose to mano sonra songba sanara to sokse samlo to tene ngata kurgo samano sonra gelux ba inzer de jen kur jerimbo chetene sumo poticho kyape chang kachega arjus metkana te matiga no so tena sola jana chodlo kone khona chodlo po chi yin to use met ngachi chi yin chonangan plan in pistan zer to sokse tene ichega zuk samlot kurte tene tezu chochaso chogri chochas potene man madiga no so kaspe sumbuchi duk to tan taste ngata tene sem trangpe gona tene taste chogosano se duk chona tekana tene ngata tene loske to se rikpa pelcha se tene tezu phanto yo chaso tes kondun tebusu ngata jerimbu che sumbo tana tenes konduni chosen nacho tene sungste in mal tan mana rikpe chatpar pat chamo zate hal ha la chase tene rikpe chame gona tene stakcha zate izuga bejung pol durte jagar kas bejung pol durt sange si jung zikte ten ma tan choste takcha te yo cha so ra hal janna gone ma por samste yo chap
So I just remembered another thing. It's like killing time, it seems, but when the treatise by Tsongkhapa, which is called the differentiating the provisional and definitive meanings of the sutras, was translated into Hindi, and the Sanskrit scholar Tripathi, Ramashankar Tripathi in Varanasi, and also Upadhyaya, when so they actually went through the Sanskrit texts that are extant in like Karika and so forth, and then also helped the translation of this text into Hindi. And when I later met Tripathi and told him that you were involved in this translation of the differentiation of the provisional and definitive meanings of the sutras, and I asked him whether this author of this text could be considered one of the Nalanda masters or not, and scholars or not, and he said that not only that he could be considered a master or a scholar of Nalanda master, but he would be considered the most excellent scholar of Nalanda.
Kshaning Zerkan Buketana, Tsongkhapa Tene Daxi, Umesko Lama, Chaspeta Project Chahal, Tebaketana Warren, Gen Isha Tapkastan, Tene Triparty Jukane, Professor Niske, Hindi na Jura Zacha, Triparty Kertanama, Sanskrit Makaspa Matapo in Chaswar, Tenekumate, Kitapa Gursa, Tenes Kunduni, Triparty, Tizapin, Malahal, the election Ningpo, Soma Zatkane, Pote Kaspa Botang, Tene Nalen de Kaspa Gun Uzoga, Aldurtana, Tene Jerimboche, Kazuxia, Lepto, Zerte, Juspin, Malahal, Tenekoma Triparty Skunduni, language Raza. Kaspenana, Nalande Kaspenana, Kaspaman, Trapo, Tene, Jurte dogs that is condole jura so. Tene Darising Hamena took Sondone Tene Kertena, Dang Tenengata, Shugdan Skola, Songsha Salkan Bena, Tene, Shugdan Stenkan Gonis, Tene Naja Managelux per Samains, Samain Tenenazi Chigena Kertena, Tene Snigni, Specific on board Choame, Zerkane, Tezux Peratano, Mola, Tegun Madigano, Sora. Tenis Kunduni testing na Tebuson Zatala Tene, Dotang, Schnaxena Tene, Jerimboche Tene, Sang Duspe, Score, Tang, Teososetene, Schnaxcola, Matapo, Mapotene, Chasper Samte, Yotja, Sora, Testongi Scola Tennis Kunduni, Mama Poson Azatene, Lexen Hibo Suazadana Yang, Tene, Yurtubna, Tene, Koshish.
Oh, yeah. That's enough. Oh.
So does everyone have the text? So he's done this thanks to Samstanling Monastery for printing this text. So first there is a salutation to Manjushri, Namo Manju Goshaya. I pay homage to my master and Manjushri. So the first verse says, he who speaks on the basis of seeing, this makes him a knower and teacher unexcelled. One who has seen and then taught, through which he could be inferred as the knower and the teacher unexcelled. I bow to you, O conqueror, you who saw dependent origination and taught it. So he's only pointing out a spelling mistake in the Tibetan text. In the first line, it should be an instrumental case instead of the connecting case. So of all the founding teachers of the different religious traditions, the reality of dependent origination is only taught by the Buddha. So according to the Sankhya school, which I mentioned earlier, they say that the primal factor and the conscious being are the ultimate reality, and the rest are conventional reality. So of course Buddhism teaches, all the Buddhist traditions and philosophical schools teach selflessness. But in order to understand selflessness really precisely and accurately, then we need to understand the dependent origination, the reality of dependent origination well. So here, Master Tsongkhapa is not praising the Buddha only from the point of view of having taught that of dependent origination in terms of causation, but that he taught selflessness from the point of view of the subtle understanding of selflessness. So why is this important? Why is it important to understand the subtle understanding of dependent origination in order to come to the conclusion or the insight into selflessness is not because of being able to come up with some thesis which others have not yet written, to come up with some kind of original understanding and so forth, to show your scholarship, but we do not want suffering, but we have suffering. And so on the basis of understanding law of causality, there is an explanation of the suffering. And when you think about and reflect on what has brought about suffering, is this suffering and misery that we have come from our karma or actions. So the action that brings about this samsaric existence is because of our attachment and anger and so forth. And so these negative emotions, the disturbing emotions, how do they arise in us? They do not come without any causes and conditions. They are not causeless, but they come from causes. And when you look at the cause basically is this clinging to an independent self. Of course, we all have the notion or the sense of an I, but we also hold on to this self as being independent. And therefore, hatred and anger and attachment, if you try to trace their source, it's this ignorance. So the text here says, whatever degenerations there are in the world, the root of all this is ignorance. So although things are merely dependently designated, yet we do not see that. What we see is that things have some independent objective existence, just as they appear to us. And therefore, this is a distorted view. So you are confused about the reality here because you hold on to what appears, and therefore you have this ignorance. which is the root of all misfortunes or degenerations in the world. So this ignorance cannot go away through prayer or recitation or reciting mantras or doing prostrations and going around the temples and so forth. But you need to create the causes and conditions. So just as in Pramanavartika it is said that this ignorance cannot be overcome merely through compassion or love, but it can only be overcome by a wisdom or a mind understanding reality, which actually is diametrically opposed to this ignorance. So here Rinpoche mentions that the Buddha, you taught that it is dependent origination, that seeing of which will undo this ignorance. So he doesn't mention the seeing of selflessness or emptiness will undo this ignorance, because then it could also be a position which is similar to the other philosophical schools within Buddhism, like Chittamatras or the Savatantrika Madhyamaka. So how can an intelligent person not comprehend that this path of dependent origination is the essential point of your teaching? This being so, who will find, O Savior, a more wonderful way to praise you than to praise you for having taught the origination through dependence? And then fifth verse. So the sutra says that what comes through conditions and has no birth. There's no nature or essence of birth in it. And what comes through conditions is empty. And understanding, those who understand it are wise. And so what this says is that whatever comes through causes and conditions, through other factors, has no independent existence. So when we say things have no independent existence, that means that things are dependent on other factors. Therefore, this understanding of the understanding that things do not have any essential independent existence is the opposite force of the clinging to some independent essential existence. So whatsoever depends on conditions, that is devoid of intrinsic existence. What excellent instruction can there be more amazing than this proclamation? So this is a reference to that sutra. So whenever we see or something, they appear to, the things appear to have some kind of objective independent existence. And we say that, this exists because I see it. And then the Chittamatras say that the appearance is there. So by grasping at it, the child is strengthened bondage to extreme views. For the wise, this very fact is the doorway to cut free from the net of elaborations. So although we say that things have no independent objective existence, yet they are merely designated with our language and conceptions, which doesn't mean that things have no existence at all, because even in that conventional terms, we can still see things happening, causes and conditions giving rise to their effects and so forth. So by grasping at it, the childish, it here refers to the appearance of things. Strength and bondage to extreme views. For the wise, this very fact is the doorway to cut free of the net of elaborations. Since this teaching is not seen elsewhere, you alone are the teacher. like calling a fox a lion for a Tirthika, non-Buddhist proponents, it would be a word of flattery. So although when we talk about some effect or result or fruit, we can say that it has come from its cause. And because of that fruit or the effect, that thing which gives rise to it is called a cause. And because if there is no fruit or effect, we cannot talk about a cause as such. A cause is defined as that which helps bring up or the result. And because there is the cause, we can talk about a result. For example, when someone is called a father, it's because he has a child. So if we could have a father without having a child, then we don't need a child at all for somebody to be called a father. But that's not the case, and therefore things cannot have their own existence without depending on others. Wondrous teacher, wondrous refuge. So since we want suffering and not, we don't want suffering and want happiness, so the causes that the one who actually has taught us the precisely what brings us suffering and happiness is the wondrous teacher. And because of his teaching, we are saved from, through a practice, we are saved from the Lord, the suffering. He's the refuge. And then he's the wondrous speaker because he taught dependent origination from his own experience. And therefore, he's also the savior. And who helps us for this and the future lives. I pay homage to the teacher who taught dependent origination to help heal sentient beings. O benefactor, you have taught the peerless reason to ascertain emptiness, the heart of the teaching. So the realists within the Buddhist tradition say that things, because they come through causes and conditions, they have their essential existence. So they use this reason to assert that things have objective existence. And therefore, if you try to reason out that things have no inherent existence because they are cause, this reason doesn't work for them. And so here the text says, this way of dependent origination, those who perceive it as contradictory or as unestablished, how can they comprehend your system? For you, one who sees emptiness in terms of the meaning of dependent origination, then being devoid of intrinsic existence and possessing valid functions, do not contradict. Because things have effect on us, we can talk about them being merely designated through labeling them. Whereas when one sees the opposite, since there can be no function in emptiness, nor emptiness in what has functions, one falls into the dreadful abyss, you maintain. So when the realists are told that things have no essential identity, they think that they understand it, or they take it to mean that things have no existence at all. And so therefore they fall in the dreadful, into the dreadful abyss. Therefore, in your teaching, seeing dependent origination is hailed, that too, not as an utter non-existence, nor as an intrinsic existence. And therefore, the Buddha is praised for teaching dependent origination, greatly praised for that. So when we talk about dependent origination, when we say that so things are without any independent existence. There's nothing which is not dependent. The non-contingent is like a skyflyer. Hence, there is nothing that is not dependent. If things exist through their essence, their dependence on causes and conditions for their existence is a contradiction. Therefore, since no phenomena exists other than origination through dependence, no phenomena exists other than being devoid of intrinsic existence, you taught. And therefore, if things were to have any intrinsic existence, they cannot depend on other factors. Because intrinsic nature cannot be negated, if phenomena possess some intrinsic nature, nirvana would become impossible. And elaboration could not be ceased. So if things were to have any intrinsic existence, then the Four Noble Truths cannot be there. Therefore, who could challenge you, you who proclaim with lion's roar in the assembly of learned ones repeatedly that everything is utterly free of intrinsic nature? And then the next verse also. So that of being empty of intrinsic existence and dependence are not contradictory to each other. But in fact, because things are dependently originated, because of this the nature of things are said to be empty of intrinsic nature, and understanding of intrinsic lack of understanding intrinsic nature also gives rise to the understanding of dependent origination. Therefore, they are not contradictory, but in fact complement each other. So in Chögyam Lama Rinpoche's praise, commentary to this text, so when we come across the word dependence, it does not negate that of the emptiness. And when we come across the term arising, origination, then that also does not negate that of emptiness, that of dependence. So therefore, Chögyam Lama Rinpoche says that what need is there to say that these two, the appearance and the emptiness, do not contradict. It is through the reason of dependent origination that one does not lean towards an extreme. That you have declared this excellently is the reason, O Savior, of your being an unexcelled teacher. Of all of this is devoid of essence, and from this arises that effect. These two certainties complement each other with no contradiction at all. And then the text says, what is more amazing than this? What is more marvelous than this? If one praises you in this manner, this is real praise, otherwise not. Being enslaved by ignorance, those who fiercely oppose you, what is so astonishing about their being unable to bear the sound of no intrinsic existence? So this is with reference to non-Buddhist traditions. And then next is with reference to the next followers of our own tradition. But having accepted dependent origination, the precious treasure of your speech, then not tolerating the roar of emptiness, this I find amazing. So verse number 26 and 27. Intrinsic nature, uncreated and non-contingent, dependent origination, contingent and created. How can these two converge upon a single basis without contradiction? So the verse number 26 shows that since things are empty of any internal existence, yet they appear to, though they appear to have some intrinsic existence, yet they do not have that way of existence, and therefore seeing the appearance is like an illusion. Through this very fact, I understand well the statement that to what you have taught, those opponents who challenge you cannot find faults that accord with reason. Why is this so? Because by declaring these chances for reification and denigration towards things seen and unseen are made most remote. So when you're able to understand the import of the teachings whereby the Buddha uses inferential reasoning and then and come to the conclusion of how things are empty because of being dependently originated, and then you will also be able to find faith, or you'll be able to trust the teachings which cannot be inferred through logic, the normal logic, but finding the Buddha to be the true speaker. So through this very path of dependent origination, the rationale for your speech being peerless, convictions arise in me also that your other words are valid too. You who speak excellently by seeing as it is, for those who train in your footsteps, all degenerations or misfortunes will become remote, for the root of all faults will be undone. But those who turn away from your teaching, though they may struggle with hardship, for a long time, faults increase evermore as if being called forth, for they make firm the view of self. Emaho, when the wise comprehend the differences between these two, why would they not at that point revere you from the depths of their being? And let alone your numerous teachings, even in the meaning of a small part, those who find ascertainment in a cursory way, this brings supreme bliss to them as well. Alas, my mind was defeated by ignorance, though I've sought refuge for a long time. In such an embodiment of excellence, I possess not a fraction of his qualities. So this I find to be a little bit exaggeration by Master Tsongkhapa, not being able to see the qualities of, even a fraction of qualities. Because he has received his called monastic vows, and also was taken care of by masters like Rinchen and then Karmapa, the fourth Karmapa, and so forth. Nonetheless, before the stream of this life flowing towards death has come to cease, that I have found slight faith in you, even this I think is fortunate. Among teachers, the teacher of dependent origination, among wisdom, the knowledge of dependent origination, you who's most excellent like the kings of the world, know this perfectly well, not others. So in the beginning, after becoming enlightened, the Buddha also came up with this statement saying that I've discovered this nectar-like dharma, which is profound, peaceful, non-elaborated, uncompounded, and clear light, which even if I were to teach others, they will not understand. Therefore, I will remain silent in the forest. So the mere word, the dependent origination, can also give you the understanding of the Four Noble Truths, that things come through dependence on others. So it says, all that you have taught proceeds by way of dependent origination. That too is done for the sake of nirvana. You have no deeds that do not bring peace. Alas, your teaching is such, in whosoever's ear it falls, they all attain peace. So, who would not be honored to uphold your teaching? So, regarding the verse number 40, which says in the third line, it grants fulfillment of the being's two aims. Wence's commentary on the Sandi Nimuchana Sutra or something. Not that. Maybe Kamala Shila's commentary on the Tattva Samgraha very clearly mentions, with regard to dependent origination, there is understanding of causal dependence, when you have a conviction in the dependence of things in terms of causality, and that understanding will make you do your practices to attain higher rebirth. And then when you understand the dependent origination in terms of the subtle dependence of which is the reality of selflessness, then you will create the causes for liberation. So Kamalashila's writing a commentary on his teacher's book, the Tattva Samgraha, mentions this. So it overcomes all opposing challenges. It's free from contradictions between earlier and later paths. It grants fulfillment of being's two aims. For this system, my joy increases evermore. So I was commenting on the fulfillment two aims. For its sake, you have given way again and again over countless eons, sometimes your body, at others your life, as well as your loving kin and resources of wealth. Seeing the qualities of this teaching pulls hard from my heart. Just like what a hook does to a fish, sad it is not to have heard it from you. So the Buddha taught dependent origination and emptiness in Gridhakuti, in Rajagriha. So it says, sad it is not to have heard it from you. The intensity of your sorrow does not let you go off my mind. Just like the mind of a mother constantly goes after her dear child. Here too, as I reflect on your words, I think blazing with the glory of noble marks and hallowed in a net of light rays. This teacher, in a voice of pristine melody, spoke thus in such a way. So when we have the opportunity to read the Kanjur and Tenjur, we may also, if you have some understanding of the teaching, we would also have the same thought. Oh, this was what the Buddha taught at that time. The instant such a reflection of sage's form appears in my mind, it soothes me, just as the moon rays heal fever's pain. This excellent system was marvelous. Some individuals who are not so learned have entangled it in utter confusion, just like a tangled Belbazar grass. Seeing this situation, I strove with a multitude of efforts to follow after the learned ones and sought your intention again and again. So this refers to at such times as I studied the numerous works of both our own middle way and other school, my mind became tormented ever more constantly by a network of doubts. So this reference to reading the text written by the masters of other philosophical schools as well as Madhyamaka schools. So someone who for over a long time have meditated, studied, reflected and meditated on the reality of dependent origination, constantly, it says, my mind became tormented ever more constantly by such a network of doubts. So the night lily grove of Nagarjuna's treatises, Nagarjuna, whom you prophesied would unravel your unexalted vehicle as it is, shunning extremes of existence and non-existence. And so, of course, there were many commentators of the middle way, the philosophy such as Chandrakshita and so forth, but reading Prasanapada, the elucidation of words, which is a commentary to the fundamental wisdom verse treatise of the middle way by Nagarjuna. And so Chandrakirti wrote that text, and resolves the criticism brought up by Bhaviveka to Buddha Palita when Buddha Palita was criticized for using the reductio ad absurdum logic in commenting on Mula Madhyamaka Karika by Nagarjuna. Bhaviveka criticized him, and then Chandrakirti actually answered and Bhaviveka's criticism. So that it became very clear between the Savatantrika and the Prasangika Madhyamakas through the Chandrakirti's answer to Bhaviveka. So when I received teaching on Mula Madhyamaka Karika and Master Tsongkhapa's commentary, The Ocean of Reasoning, regarding this particular topic of criticizing the reductio ad absurdum, which was dealt with in the text, I found it quite helpful, although it was quite difficult to understand as well. So the night lily grove of Nagarjuna's treatises, so the night lily only blooms in the night, and shunning extremes of the existence and non-existence, illuminated by the garland of white light of Chandra's well-uttered insights. So insights here refers to Chandrakirti's writing of writings like Madhyamaka Avatara and its commentary, and also particularly his Prasanapada, the elucidation of the words. And so this is what maybe the main reference here. Chandra, whose stainless wisdom orb is full, who glides freely across scripture's space, who dispels the darkness of extremist hearts and outshines the constellations of false speakers. When, through my teacher's kindness, I saw this mind found a rest at last. So, having actually received teachings on the middle way philosophy and view of emptiness, and having reflected and meditated upon it over a long period of time, and having done all the practices necessary for that, and having found or discovered this view, finally, Master Tsongkhapa says his mind has found a rest. And then with regard to the Buddha's deeds, enlightened deeds, the most important of all his deeds is that of his speech, through which he gave teaching. So therefore, it mentions here, of all your deeds, your speech is supreme. Within that too, it is this very speech. So, of course, all the teachings on reaching the higher rebirth and the knowledge that the Buddha has in order to give such teachings are amazing. But the most amazing teaching is that of the teachings which pertain to liberation. And for that, you need to understand that of the teaching of dependent origination and emptiness. So the mind has the basic nature of clarity and awareness, and although it has these qualities, but yet it has all the obscurations, like those of the defilements, like attachment, the destructive emotions, and so forth, which are temporary. And therefore, if you could understand through these teachings that these are adventitious, the defilements are adventitious, and that the clear light nature of the mind can be manifested more and more, and by gaining understanding of the possibility of nirvana, and so forth. That's more profound. So, the wise should remember the Buddha through this teaching of dependent origination. So, following such a teacher and having become a renunciate, having studied the conqueror's words not too poorly, this monk who strives in the yogic practices, such is the depths of his reverence to the great seer. So Tsongkhapa writes in his biography of his educational of his education, where he says, in the beginning I sought much learning, and then in the middle I reflected, and I found the teachings to be instruction, personal instruction, and in the end I strove in the teaching. So having done critical analysis through reason and logic, and that proving that the Buddha was a supreme teacher and an exalted teacher, and on the basis of teaching dependent origination without any contradiction, since it is due to my teacher's kindness I have met with the teaching of the unexalted teacher, I dedicate this virtue too towards the cause for all beings to be sustained by sublime spiritual mentors. May the teaching of the beneficent one, till world's end, be unshaken by the winds of evil thoughts. May it always be filled with those who find conviction in the teacher by understanding the teaching's true nature. May I never falter, even for an instant, to uphold the excellent way of the sage, which illuminates the principle of dependent origination through all my births, even giving away my body and life. May I spend day and night carefully reflecting by what means can I enhance this teaching achieved by the Supreme Savior through strenuous efforts over countless eons. As I strive in this pure intention, my Buddha, Brahma, Indra, and world's guardians as protectors such as Mahakala unswervingly always assist me. And so, as it was requested by my guru, the incomparable, former Garden Tree Rinpoche, I have given this text. And so, you should, having received this teaching, you should not just be satisfied with it. You should read the text over and over again and try to gain understanding. And there is the English translation in the booklet also. And so, in order to really gain profound understanding of the view of emptiness, you need to do much more study of philosophical texts, of the middle way philosophy. So yesterday, on my way, I saw the school children of London School waiting for me to visit them. But I was already exhausted by then when I arrived here. And so we have this school, London School children here, mainly for them, and then the others.
Yes, there. Not clear.
His owner was joking about the Ladakhi man who was trying to go down, saying that he feared that he might fall off the steps because of his big nose. So in Bodh Gaya, when I was with Kunulama, the Rinpoche from Kinur, he told me that this prayer of Manjushri, the god of wisdom, or Buddha of wisdom, was written by Indian masters from different places, wrote praise of Manjushri. When all these prayers or praise of Manjushri written by these masters were collected together, it was found that they have actually written the same praise to Manjushri. So this praise of Manjushri. There is such a story about it. So this is the praise of Manjushri, the praise to the intelligent one. I prostrate before my guru and guardian, the ennobling, impeccable Manjushri. Your intelligence shines forth like the sun, free from the clouds of the two obscurations, enabling you to see the extent of all things and how they exist. Thus you hold a scriptural text at your heart. Your affection for all of us masses who wander, plagued by problems, groping in the darkness of ignorance in the dungeons of our compulsive existence, is like that for your own child. Thus your speech is melodious with 60 facets, and so forth. So with regard to the intelligence, is like the soul or the life force of those who aspire to liberation. Although with regard to intelligence and understanding, there are the intelligence or understanding with regard to varieties of things, and but the most excellent one is the understanding of how things really exist. And so all the masters of the Tibetan Buddhist traditions and also the masters of India have received the blessing of Manjushri, and thereby they were able to accomplish their own as well as the goal of others. And therefore, remembering the qualities of the Buddha, Manjushri, body, speech, and mind, if you could recite this praise 3 times a day, every morning, regularly, it would be good. I also, since my childhood, used to recite this. My teacher, Jabjaling Rinpoche, also used to recite it 3 times. And then recite the mantra, Amarapachanadi mantra, 1 round of mala, or at the least 21 times. Please repeat this. Amarapachanadi, 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 Amarapachanadi. So let us recite it 21 times together. Amarapachanadi, 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 Amarapachanadi. And then, in one breath, let us recite the D syllable 100 times. So, inside your throat, imagine the D syllable, whether it's the Hindi or the Tibetan Uchin letter. So, imagine it, the D syllable. Inside your throats, and as you recite the D syllable, imagine at your heart also there's a D syllable, and there's a flame on top, at the tip, and then this flame melts the D syllable, and therefore the D syllable at your throat drips down. Amarapachanadi. Affectionate one, with light rays of your supreme omniscience, clear the darkness of naivety from my mind. Direct me, please, so that the confident intelligence emerges within to comprehend fully the classic text of the Buddha's words and treatises on them. So it's helpful to recite this verse to to increase your intelligence, so to become brighter. And then there are children, sometimes I meet them, and parents ask me to give blessing and blow on their mouth. The children whose stutter, stammer. So the parents or the teachers could also recite this Amparapazanadi mantra into the ears of your children, and so that the children learn to recite it, they could recite it later. And then those children who have bad tongue, it would help them to speak better by reciting this D syllable. So His Holiness is confused, he says. He saw number 3 on his watch and says it's 11:30, and he saw number 4 and then says it's 11:40. So it's 11:20. So today is the last day of my visit to Nubra, and therefore I wish to do the ceremony for generating bodhicitta. So of course, with the help of wisdom of realizing emptiness, the essence of the teaching of the Buddha is bodhicitta, which is the spirit of the altruistic spirit of enlightenment. So if you have the mere understanding of emptiness, that will not lead you to Buddhahood as such. And therefore, that which actually backs or supports this wisdom of emptiness to become a cause for Buddhahood is bodhicitta. So if the Buddha had not been able to practice and cultivate bodhicitta, even if he may have the ultimate understanding of emptiness, the view of emptiness, he would not have reached Buddhahood, but may have become an arahat, a mere arahat. So even though if you may be a non-believer, the greater your sense of caring for others and altruistic attitude, and whenever you have the opportunity to help others, you do so. I mean, it would be help you and the world. So, of course, if you have bodhicitta coupled with the wisdom of emptiness, I mean the wisdom of emptiness coupled complemented by bodhicitta, there's no need to mention how happy that you will be happy. But even if you do not have this experience of bodhicitta, if you have a good heart, warm heart towards others, and care for the well-being of others, you'll be happy, and then the society in which you live also will be happy. As human beings, we are social animals, and therefore we need to depend on the community that we live in and the others in that community. And if you remain selfish, only thinking of your own well-being alone, I mean, you will not have happiness. So as social animals, because our happiness is dependent on the community and the society, if we could actually consider others with love and compassion, then this is actually the wise way of accomplishing your own goal. Usually what we do is we actually disregard the well-being of others, your community and society, and works for your own. We individually work for our own good, but that's a foolish way of trying to achieve your goal. So if you have love and compassion, I mean, you will have happiness and peace of mind, which also helps you to have good health. and you'll have more friends and dear ones, near ones to whom you can actually reach out when you have problems and difficulties. And otherwise, if you remain selfish, only thinking of your own happiness, then you will not be able to reach out to others for help. And people will actually find you to be very selfish and not good. And even when you die, they will say, oh, it's so good that this person, this selfish, self-centered person has died. And if you are someone who really thinks of the welfare of others in your community, that you are altruistic, dedicated for others' well-being, then others will actually feel sad to lose you when you die. And therefore, in all religious traditions also, they teach that of the practice of love and compassion. So we'll not use any complicated verse or text, but we'll use this one verse text for cultivating bodhicitta. So when you say that through the practices of generosity and so forth, through which I collect merit and wisdom, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. So there was this tradition of generating bodhicitta through this verse during the times of Purchok Ngawang Champa in the 18th, I think 17th, 18th, 19th centuries. So even though here you should think that you will not be an angry person or a person full of jealousy and so forth and harming others, but that you will have a good heart, a warm heart. If you could live your life according to this principle of love and compassion towards others, I mean, it's quite, we can guarantee that you'll have a better next life. So not harming others, but helping others. So this is the main cause for happiness in the future lifetimes as well as this life. To the Buddha, Dharma, and the Supreme Community, I take refuge until enlightenment is attained. Through the collections, by practicing giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. To the Buddha, Dharma, and Supreme Community, I seek refuge until enlightenment is attained. Through the collections, by giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. To the Buddha, Dharma, and the Supreme Community, I seek refuge until attaining enlightenment. Through the collections, by giving and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. May this jewel supreme bodhicitta arise where it has not arisen. Where it has arisen, may it not decline, but ever increase evermore. If I don't exchange my joys and happiness with the suffering of others perfectly, leave alone attaining enlightenment, the Buddhahood, even in samsara, there will not be happiness. Which intelligent person will feel discouraged to ride the horse of bodhicitta, which does away with all despair and takes you from bliss to bliss? Just like the space and all the great elements such as earth, may I always support the life of all the boundless creatures. As long as space remains, as long as sentient beings remain, may I too remain to dispel the suffering of beings. So I do this, I do pray all the time, and it helps So since it helps me, because you are also same like me, as human beings we are same, and we also have these negative emotions and so forth, the three poisons. So you should also make these prayers. So this is like my gift to you, and having come to Nubra on this final day of my visit to Nubra. So this is a Thanksgiving mandala offering. Temba nyu shindu saba ta tenza punu shindu. Temba yurin ebeta shisho. So His Holiness wants us to say the prayer called the Words of Truth, written by him.
Chabara kanjo shodan kendro na sho la le ponye sen Mambo jombe chatan chime yurdo shepe tuje tebo Yongwa denje yebe langzhe ke langzhe nye tong jipe nye Lisho jewe zona langdo lo ne yongdo chamzen zewe bela
Pays homage to the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas, calling on them to pay attention to these true words of sorrow. And then practitioners of the Dharma read these the 10 kinds of Dharma conduct and particularly for migratory beings in the snowland oppressed by evil actions by the barbarian that devoid of love may you, power of compassion arise and quickly stop the flow of blood and tears. And such we pray to the patron deity of Tibet, Chendrisika
Oh yeah. That's all. Oh yeah.
So, see you next time.